Hello and welcome everybody. Patricia Carney is my name. I'm the UCC lead PI for the PPI Ignite network, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. I have the celebratory balloons in the background, and we had hoped to be doing this in person, and I look forward to meeting many of you in person in the months and years ahead as we develop PPI Ignite in UCC. So as many of you will be aware, PPI, patient and public involvement, is not something that is new to UCC, but I suppose the Ignite network is, and I'm only going to speak very briefly because we have a fantastic array of speakers who are going to talk to you today about the work that's already ongoing in UCC. And really one of the purposes of the Ignite network is to bring some of that together. So I do want to acknowledge that the Irish Research Council and the Health Research Board who are funding the national PPI network. So Emmy, would you move on there? In terms of the national network, it's a network of a number of different universities across Ireland, and in each of those institutions a dedicated PPI centre already exists or is being developed. I want to really focus here today on UCC, and you'll see that we are really fortunate to already have a number of partners who are working with us. Some of them are research centres that exist within UCC that are working very closely with patients and the public, and then across really the community, across health services, across our city, our city of Sanctuary. So you can see there that already we're really trying to engage with the public. And I suppose I should have maybe mentioned at the outset what we mean. So we talk about the term PPI and use it very frequently. And simply what that means is patient and public involvement, specifically in terms of the work that we're doing in the Ignite network around research. And when we're talking about involvement, what we're talking about is that members of the public are involved in making decisions about what research is done and how that research is done. And today we're going to hear some really great examples of how that's happening in practice within the UCC community. So in terms of the actual activities and the overall network, there's basically 5 work packages within the national network, and we have activities within UCC, or planned activities across all of those different streams of work. And really what we're thinking about and working towards is around building awareness of PPI, looking at capacity across the community, and developing the network further. We really want to embed PPI and that approach both locally within UCC and nationally, and thinking about it. I mentioned research, but it's also about developing capacity at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels, so that our students, as well as our community, that we're all really working together from this perspective. And then one of the things that we really want to do is promote PPI excellence. So I'm going to hand back now to Emmy. I should have mentioned Emmy is the PPI manager in UCC. Many of you will have met her, or I hope will have had the opportunity to meet her. She's a fantastic advocate for PPI, and she's really the first contact point for those of you based in UCC looking for more information. We will be launching our website soon, and that'll have more contact information and details. So over to Emmy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Patricia, and thanks for that overview. So as Patricia mentioned, I'm Emmy Racine. I'm the Programme Manager for PPI Ignite Network at UCC, and it's really fantastic to see so many people joining today. It's great to see such interest and appetite for PPI across the university and beyond as well. And we're just delighted that you can all join us for this launch event. So I suppose there's been a lot of work. This is the start of PPI Ignite at UCC, but there has been a lot of work to get us to this point. So today is really a celebration of that, and a celebration of some of the fantastic PPI that's being done already across the university and across our partner organisations. So our first segment today is to showcase different examples of PPI across the university. We've got 3 fantastic speakers lined up. Dr. Samantha Dockery, who's already sharing her screen, fantastic. Samantha Dockery is from the School of Applied Social Studies. She's going to talk about the PPI component of the MyUse study. We also have Dr. Sheena McHugh from the School of Public Health, who's going to speak about the PPI component of the customised study that she's currently leading. And then we have Dr. Phelim O'Hamel from the School of Applied Social Studies, who's going to talk about his experiences involving former prisoners in participatory research projects. So I'll hand over to you now, Samantha.
Oh, thank I'm too trigger happy on the clicking today with the mouse. It's Friday. Hi everyone, I'm Samantha. I'm in the School of Applied Psychology and I'm here today to talk about the My Use project and represent the work that we've been doing with students as our PPI group. The My Use project grew out of a voiced need by students themselves for a harm reduction program designed around reducing the harms of student-related student drug use. The project was to develop a digital health intervention. So this was a project that was designed not to develop just a health intervention, but to make a digital product. And students were a critical part and co-collaborators, co-creators with us right from the get-go, not only because they were the ones to say, we want a solution to support the best wellbeing for our students at UCC, but also because they are the voice on the ground. So PPI involvement, I suppose, enriches our research by making sure that we're drawing upon not only, I suppose, the most rigorous or robust research or theoretical models that we have, but also making sure that we can tailor them. And our PPI collaborators help us tailor our project. So we had participatory involvement all the way through. And this was, we were following along some of the PPI work, sorry, not PPI work, but digital health interventions that had been developed for college students across the world. But it was reported that their effect was inconsistent, mixed at best. And one of the reasons is that they were generally not developed with students. Students didn't have an input into say what was needed, what would best suit their needs. So we adopted a PPI approach right from the beginning and had to think carefully about how were we going to build this in? What structures, what methods were we going to use to make sure that we really provided a space for the student voice and didn't just carry on creating our health psychology informed, public health informed, student health informed product. So we used strategies such as persona building, and one of the things that this did for our project was it prompted us to think about the diversity within our PPI group. So within a PPI partnership, so whether that's with a person or a group, we must remember that they are a very diverse group, just as we as researchers were very diverse, in our case, multidisciplinary. So we planned for PPI involvement and student contribution and co-creation of our work all the way through using workshops, participatory kind of design approaches. And for most of us, this was a new approach. It involved thinking about ways to be more creative, to create spaces for everyone who was involved to contribute in a way that they felt safe, confident and were respected for. And in our case, we're dealing with an illicit behaviour and students who may have had some concerns about sharing that. So we had to think about what can we do to make sure that our process is pure, but also that our participants, our PPI group, feel very protected. And I think we did that really well, and I'm happy to share content with people how we did that later or off screen. So we worked with students to develop our health intervention designed to reduce the harms associated with drug use, but also our product. So students were saying to us, you know, things like that works, that doesn't work, that looks silly, that's not cool, those kinds of things. And this involved very creative ways that take a lot of time. So I'm going to say that PPI is something that, as a principle, I've always done in my work, as does all the rest of the research team, but it allows more attention, more time, and that's why I'm delighted to see the supports we'll have at UCC to guide researchers in how to make sure that you're doing it not only with the best of intentions, but with the best process. So there are many benefits. In the case of the MyEase project, we're now almost ready to launch this product that is co-created with students as our PPI group. But I will say that it was it was quite an adventure, is I think how I'd describe it. We had a lot of disruptions that were very positive, like this. When we talk about disruptive technology, we can think about PPIs as disruptors to the status quo about how researchers go about doing things. And we had to think carefully about equity and equality of contribution and how to make sure that we allowed space for that. And to recognise, as I said at the top of my, I'm worried now I've gone over 5 minutes, but at the top of my little slot, that our PPI collaborators represent individuals who represent a broader group. And I think that was a central principle that I wanted to flag today. So I'm happy to talk more about this afterwards, but I'm now going to hand the mic to Dr. Sheena McHugh, who I think is online. I'll stop sharing, who's going to talk about her work in PPI.
Thanks, Samantha. So, hi everyone, my name is Sheena McHugh. I'm from the School of Public Health in UCC, and I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of how I'm incorporating PPI into the Customise project, which is a 5-year programme of research involving lots of different studies funded by the Health Research Board Research Leader Award. So, as I said, we have a number of different studies that all concentrate in the area of implementation science, which is the study of methods to support the uptake of evidence and evidence-based practices into routine healthcare. Or as one of our PPI contributors put it much more eloquently, there are things out there that can help, and we just need to make sure that they happen in the health service. And that's, I suppose, at the core of the research that we do. Also at the core of our project are our PPI panel, who are here in the centre of the slide. And they've been working with us for a couple of years. So thankfully, they were able to be involved from the very outset in putting together the application for this award, advising us on different sections of the grant and helping us to refine our research questions. They also advise us in how we do our research. So we would seek the input of our panel in how we sample, how we recruit, where we recruit. They would help us to improve our materials and to think about our methods and how we're collecting our data and how we reduce participant burden in our research. The other area where we've really found it beneficial to have our panel is in dissemination of our research findings, thinking about different target groups, different ways of disseminating, using different media. And that has worked really well for us in previous projects where we would have had our PPI contributors as co-authors in some of our research outputs and also as co-presenters. So we're really hoping that that's something that we can continue to do in this project. And I suppose something for me personally that I have found really beneficial that cuts across all of the areas of our work and all of our studies is the input that we have from our group in terms of how we communicate our research and the language that we use. So during one of our first meetings this year, we asked our group to suggest words that come to mind when they think about implementation, and they generated this word cloud. And it's really been a resource for us as a team to think about how we describe our research and the language that we use to make it most accessible to our audience. So we've found that the PPI panel really enhance the quality of our work, but they also bring an enthusiasm to the project, which is really important when you're working on something, as Samantha said, that takes a lot of time. In our case, we're looking at a 5-year project, and so they bring a freshness and new ideas and enthusiasm to our work, and we're really looking forward to working with PPI Ignite in UCC to enhance and strengthen the PPI involvement in our work. So I'm happy to speak to anyone about what we've done so far after this meeting if anyone wants to contact me. And now I'm going to hand over to Phelim to speak about his experience.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phelim O'Hamel. I'm a lecturer in applied social studies, and I've got a varied background, one of which involves involvement in the volunteering community sector. When I was asked to talk about PPI and my involvement in PPI, I was unsure which project to pick, and I know I've only got 5 minutes, so it's sort of difficult to try and even talk about one project. But I've been involved in participatory research over many years, from really the 1980s, both as a community activist in my own area and also as an academic. And that's gone across things, a whole range of different social problems, including healthcare inequalities and health promotion, etc. But I thought I would just talk today about one piece of research that I was involved in the early noughties or the mid noughties, 2004, 2005. And this was a project which was run by Queen's University jointly with lecturers from the Ulster University, and I was working in Ulster University at the time. And it was looking at politically motivated ex-prisoners in the north, both loyalists and Republicans, people who had been jailed as a result of the conflict from the 1960s up until the peace process in 1998. And after the peace process, these prisoners had been released as part of the peace process. And a lot of them had been involved in community work, and we were looking at their work in the community and also their work in basically conflict transformation, etc. And we were looking at the impediments to that they faced in daily lives. So the research itself was in participation with two particular ex-prisoner groups which had been funded by EU peace money. One was EPIC, which was a UVF or Loyalist Prisoner ex-prisoner group in the Shankill Road in Belfast, and another was Taras Jack, which means come in, which was a Republican ex-prisoners group in the New Lodge area of Belfast. North and West Belfast was the area of the Troubles which suffered the most casualties. It's estimated that about 25% of all casualties during the conflict took place in that particular area, in those particular areas where these ex-prisoners came from. And we looked at their experience of prison. We looked at the experience of their relatives of somebody close to them being in prison, but then we looked at release, the experience of release, and also the role that they played or wanted to play in society, and what were some of the impediments that they faced. This particular research involved a survey of 300 ex-prisoners. It involved several workshops with both loyalist ex-prisoners in the same workshop talking about the issues, and it also involved focus groups with both Republicans and loyalists separate and then together. It also involved a series of semi-structured interviews within both communities. We're talking about a highly segregated society. We're talking about Shankill Road being predominantly loyalist working class, New Lodge being predominantly nationalist working class. And we interviewed, of the 300 people interviewed, they included relatives as well as prisoners. And the type of stuff some of the difficulties we found in terms of doing the research was terminology, because both sets of prisoners looked upon things different ways. Even things like paramilitaries. Loyalists looked upon themselves as paramilitaries, that they were aiding the state in many ways. That's how they viewed it, as a military organisation or military organisations trying to destroy the IRA or destroy the Republicans or the Nationalists or whatever it was. Republicans refused to accept that particular terminology because they regard themselves as political activists. They wanted to bring about political change, and they only saw military struggle as an aspect of that. They saw political struggle and community activism as much more important. And that was reflected in the type of work that some of them were doing in their local communities. Republicans tend to be more active in their local communities. They tend to be more involved in politics. They tend to be more likely to be elected, etc. Loyalists often had a difficulty in relation to that. They often felt that their communities looked upon them as somebody to go to at times of emergency. They're the people who are going to man the barricades, staff the barricades, I suppose you should say, and defend the area. But when it came to things like providing for community resources and community needs or political representation, they'd prefer to go to the likes of the Democratic Unionist Party rather than the loyalist ex-prisoners, etc. So there was a different view in the different communities about what the role of these people were. In terms of some of the impediments that they had, impediments included things like having a criminal record, which within a place like West Belfast or the New Lodge wasn't a problem, because being a former Republican prisoner actually gave you kudos in terms of your standing in a local community. Less so for loyalists, because a lot of the loyalist communities would often view these prisoners as people who should have maybe joined the RUC or the Ulster Defence Regiment or something like that, an official state body, rather than being involved in unofficial actions, etc. So within their own communities, there would have been different views of them, but outside their own communities, of course, then because people had criminal records, that often prevented them from adopting children, from fostering children, from getting certain jobs, etc. So those were types of issues that some of them talked about. Things like insurance, trying to get insurance for houses and all that type of stuff were issues. In terms of victimhood, one of the interesting things came out about the research was that it's very difficult to talk about perpetrator and victim, and there's a whole debate at the moment about legacy in the North and also who are victims. I mean, we saw some really strange, really interesting, I suppose, results in terms of numbers of deaths. For example, 95% of Republican former prisoners and 78% of Loyalist former prisoners had lost a friend during the conflict. 58% of Republican relatives and 45% of Loyalist relatives had lost a friend. And then that translated into losing a relative. More than half of Republican former prisoners, that's 55%, and 48% of their relatives had lost a relative, compared to 42% of Loyalist prisoners. So one of the difficulties when we were talking about this particular work I mentioned already was about terminology, even things like, can we use the word police? Because the word police for Republican former prisoners seemed to suggest that this was their police, and even though they had accepted the PSNI, they didn't regard them as in the same way as they would have regarded a normal police force. I would say Loyalists were much more inclined to accept words like police. Things like even the terminology for the area, Northern Ireland, Republicans would have rejected that term and wanted the North included, for example, in the survey. So what we ended up having to do was do two different surveys in terms of terminology, but asking the same questions or the same with the same understandings. It's just the terminology was different because we had to get acceptance from the two communities to support basically the survey and the interviews, etc. And bearing in mind that we're still in a situation, if any of you have heard of the Boston tapes controversy, we're still in a situation where people can be still arrested for things that happened during the Troubles, etc. We had to be really careful that, first of all, the people that we were interviewing trusted us, and secondly, that the questions we asked didn't incriminate them in any way, and the answers that we got didn't incriminate them. So we had to be really careful in terms of informed consent and ensuring that they knew that they could withdraw at any time. And I think that was probably one of the big failures with the Boston tapes situation, where they didn't actually consider all these types of considerations. I'm not sure how many minutes I've got left, if any.
Fantastic, Phelim. Thanks very much. And I know there was a really strong participatory element of that project in terms of, deciding on the terminology and the approaches used. So brilliant. Thanks so much. And thanks to Samantha and Sheena as well for providing such interesting and kind of thought-provoking overviews. And I know it's a very brief snapshot, but hopefully people here know that you can kind of get in touch with Samantha, Phelim and Sheena if you do have any questions. We have time now to take actually a question or a comment if anyone wants to share your thoughts. There's a hand up. Laura Sam, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you very much for that really interesting overview, all three of you. I was just wondering at the different approaches and whether the particular patient or public group that you're targeting, whether that influences at what point you bring people into the participatory piece, or whether there's a general rule that, as early as possible.
Could I say something in relation to that?
Thank you.
I think often depends on the community, but I've been involved in a lot of participatory research down through the years, and you can see it in growing greyness in my hair and the loss of follicles, etc. One of the things about participatory research is that you're dependent on participation from communities, and sometimes communities don't want to participate. Sometimes it's not worth their while. And I've been involved in projects where, for example, one particular health promotion research piece of research where we trained up interviewees in the community in order to engender some sort of enthusiasm, and we had support from the local community organisation right from the word go, and they were there right through to the end with the writing up of the report. And another piece of research that I was involved in Cork, I won't say where in Cork, the community organisation was really enthusiastic at the start, got involved, actually volunteered people to go round doors with surveys and all the rest of it. But as we went on with the survey, the interest started to wane, because this is like, it's a bit like doing a PhD. Like the biggest thing of the lot is actually trying to stick at it, because there's so many other things affecting you. And I think those are important issues. When it comes to controversial issues like the one we were involved in, where, like, to be honest, somebody like me walking into a loyalist area, I could end up in serious trouble with an Irish name and my background and all the rest of it. So we had to be really, really careful that we had buy-in from the local communities and support from them, and they totally trusted what we were doing. And they did actually totally trust us. It was a very much a cross-community approach to this, and it was very much an involvement of people who had actual respect, in those communities. And that was really what was needed. And I think that if we're talking about participation, we need to be thinking in terms of building a relationship. How much the local community will, or the patients will actually participate, will be up to them. But we have to build that trusting relationship, which is so important. Sorry for taking so much time.
Absolutely. Samantha, do you want to come in there?
Oh, I was just going to pick up on something that Phelim said, in that it's quite a contribution that you're asking for people to do. And the longer a project is and the more intense it is, it might pay to think about bringing different groups of people in at different times who may want to contribute to different elements of the project. But, I think fatigue for researchers is real, and it's equally real for our participant groups. So being mindful about not only how you recognise their contribution and compensate it for time. So we're all paid to do this. Well, maybe not all of us, but most of us might be paid. So recognising those more practical elements, as well as fatigue and, like the long slog of research, and when people may run out of oomph at that time and may want to take a break. So thinking carefully ahead of time to build that in.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Fionnuala Larkin, do you have a question or comment?
I do. It's actually related to that last point, I suppose, about compensating, because I'm kind of aware that with participatory research, NIHR, I think, advised that you pay people to kind of contribute or compensate them for their time. And I'm just curious whether there's any, or people are aware of pots of funding that can be used for encouraging participatory research and being able to pay, even if it's just vouchers or something, but being able to pay people back a little bit for their time rather than it being all on goodwill. Are people aware of funding either nationally or in UCC or through any networks?
I can come in there if you like. So certainly payment is something that one of the work streams I mentioned was around sort of looking at the systems and thinking about that. And so I think what's happened, at least my own experience, would be that researchers have found different solutions depending on what their funding is available to them, what their university allows, and whether it's vouchers or other ways of acknowledging the contribution. But one of the pieces of work that we're hoping to do within the network is to really look at this and agree, so that, like the UK, there would be sort of recognised rates and mechanisms that would be common across the different universities. And on that, I did want to mention as well, I'm really, because this is the launch in UCC, I really wanted to focus, but I am conscious that our national lead, Sean Deneen, who is leading the overall Ignite network, is on the call today, as well as Edel. And I just wanted to acknowledge one of the things that I found hugely helpful has been the support and encouragement of all the other universities that are involved, and particularly the group in Galway led by Sean. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. So we'll move on now to the next segment. So next up, we're going to hear from 3 speakers who are working in patient and community organisations, and then we also have an individual PPI contributor who's going to speak as well. So first up, we've got Dr. Nikki Dunn, who's going to speak from Family Carers Ireland about PPI in Family Carers Ireland and your experience of PPI and what PPI Ignite means to her as well. Next, we're going to hear from Karen Charnley, who's the director of the All Ireland Institute for Hospice and Palliative Care. And again, Karen is going to talk about her experiences and perspectives of PPI. So thanks very much, Karen, for joining us. And then finally, we'll have Stephanie Skeffington, who is an individual PPI contributor. She's a patient advocate for rheumatic and respiratory conditions. And Stephanie has been involved in a number of research projects in UCC and other universities as well. So looking forward to hearing her perspectives on PPI as well. So I might hand over to you first, Nikki.
Great, thank you, Emmy, and thanks for the introduction and the invite to speak here today. So I only have a few minutes, so I'll just get straight into it. So Family Carers Ireland have been involved in participatory research for quite a long time, before my time within the organisation. And typically when we've been approached with requests to advise on research, to sit on steering committees and so on, we would usually try to put forward a family carer for the role. It's always preferable for us to, you know, where appropriate, to have a family carer to go in with their lived experience, and we've always encouraged researchers to talk to carers as well, to inform their research. So facilitating research and facilitating carer involvement is something that we've been doing for a long time, but it has been really on an ad hoc and a very unstructured way. So when I joined the organisation in 2019, in March 2019, I had started to see, over that time, I saw an increase in requests for PPI support from researchers. And I began to see the value of having an internal panel within Family Carers Ireland who have training in research, who have training in PPI, and, you know, not just being involved in one-off projects, but really, you know, that they can take that experience into multiple projects. And we also kind of thought that it would be good to have a mechanism where carers who were involved in research could bring the skills that they were learning in research projects back into the organisation and sharing with other carers who are interested in being involved with research. So PPI Ignite and Health Research Charities Ireland were really critical to the development of that group internally. They gave lots of advice and facilitated, delivered training, and really supported us in, you know, the establishment of documents like terms of reference and so on. Now, more recently, we have become a member of UCC PPI Ignite. We're also a member of UCD PPI Ignite, and we've just found, you know, being part of both kind of committees really rewarding. Emmy and I are discussing ways that we might bring researchers and carers together at that very early stage and in the research process. So at the moment, we are kind of probably a little bit more reactive, responsive. Researchers are coming to us with kind of already formed research ideas or research questions, and but we haven't kind of got to that point where that, like, the norm really is that carers aren't kind of being involved at the very earliest stages of research. So Emmy has, you know, kind of supporting ideas for how we might actually kind of encourage that, and really, I think that's going to be the next step for our PPI panel. And, you know, as Phelim had kind of mentioned, that can be a problem in terms of, you know, buy-in within, like, carers who are involved with research. So at the moment, you know, we do have researchers or carers involved in a project where, you know, they speak so highly of the researchers, and the relationships are really good and they feel really well respected. But, you know, there is that sense that maybe the research questions aren't completely relevant to carers because they weren't brought in at that early stage. And I think that is, you know, an ongoing problem. But I recognize that, you know, there is the will and the motivation to kind of change that as well. And hopefully, you know, through taking on some of Emmy's ideas and advice, that's where we'll be going with the panel next. I think it's also worth noting that since my time within Family Carers Ireland, I've seen a real cultural shift in terms of the requests that are coming in from researchers for support. The last minute requests for support, which were really a norm when I first started, requests to find a carer, to, you know, talk to kind of sign off on, you know, on the PPI kind of part of the grant proposal. That is becoming rarer and rarer, where it was a norm, you know, a couple of years ago. And there's also a real acknowledgement from researchers to acknowledge PPI contributors' time through budgets. You know, so there's definitely, I think, a shift with that, although there are a lot of issues there to be ironed out, you know, in terms of how people are financially recognised. And that's, I know that I think there's a motivation there as well to try to iron out those issues. But obviously PPI Ignite is absolutely key in that, and what I'm hearing from our panel is really positive as well. They feel like any of the researchers that they're engaging with are, you know, really listening to them, taking on board their views. There's definitely not a tokenistic approach, which I have seen that as well. But for the most part, the people who are working, the researchers who are working with our PPI panel have, you know, are kind of engaging in meaningful PPI, which is wonderful to see. It's also worth mentioning the importance of the network in terms of building relationships. So we're getting an opportunity to meet researchers who are interested in having carers involved in research. And so it's a fantastic kind of opportunity for Family Carers Ireland to, you know, meet researchers, and for researchers to meet us and know that we exist and that we're there to support research as well. And it's also really useful for us in terms of meeting other charities or individual patient representatives or care representatives. You know, some charities are kind of at the earlier stage of the kind of PPI journey, and some are kind of further on. And, you know, there's just so much learning there as well for amongst kind of the charities as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's just been a very rewarding experience so far. It's really influenced our approach to research and the direction that we want to go in. So it is really exciting just to see what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And I'll stop there and I'll pass over to Karen, who is the director of the All Ireland Institute for Hospice and Palliative Care. Thank you.
Super. I'm going to try and now share my screen. I'm hoping it's going to share. Oh. Well, I'll talk to
Yeah, we can see that it's quite small, but we can see it. Can you make it a little bit bigger?
I can't see it on mine, which is a bit unfortunate. I'll maybe go. Oh, is that changing this? Oh, do you know?
I think it's on presenter view, but I can read the text. Oh, yeah, if you want. Yeah, great. If you want to go in full slide mode, it might be easier to see. Perfect. Brilliant.
Super, thank you. Sorry about that. The first time I've used Microsoft Teams for sharing my screen. So anyway, without further ado, I'm conscious of the clock. So hi, my name's Karen. I'm from the All Ireland Institute of Hospice and Palliative Care. Just a little bit about us. We were established in 2010 with the aim of improving the palliative care experience across the island of Ireland. We have 26 partners, including universities, health and social care trusts, hospices, charities, Department of Health in the Republic and the Public Health Agency. So in 2013, we established Voices for Care, which is our service user, carer and interested citizen panel. We've reviewed the membership twice, so in 2016 and 2019. And we currently have 41 members from across the island of Ireland. We wrote to members earlier this year asking if they would stay with us for a further year, and most of them confirmed. The vast majority confirmed that they'd stay another year, just because of the impacts of COVID on the number of opportunities they'd had. So anyway, 41 members are still with us. We have a clear terms of reference which really set out what members can expect from the Institute, so our commitment to them, and also what we'd ask of them in terms of just communicating with us. So we have the terms of reference. Voices for Care influence both the work of the Institute. So, for example, recently we held Palliative Care Week, our annual raising awareness. Voices for Care were consulted throughout the developing the plans for Palliative Care Week. So, for example, on consulted, I suppose in these times, by email and the like, and in a meeting, but consulted about the text for leaflets, and we got a lot of good feedback about just ensuring that it was plain English and understandable to all. Sometimes I think as the team get a little bit close to text, so just ensuring it's fully understandable. Members of Voices for Care disseminated materials in their local communities, and some members, you know, also held had stands, for example, as part of their work. So, and we have members of Voices for Care on the Institute's Palliative Care Research Network Strategic Scientific Committee and on the Council of Partners, our board. Voices for Care are also engaged with by our partners, and I'm going to say a little bit about research in a second. So, but in terms of policy developments in Northern Ireland, there's a Palliative Care in Partnership Regional Board, and the board has a service user carer subgroup, which Voices for Care make up the subgroup, and we coordinate that. So before every board meeting, there's 4 board meetings a year, there's a service user carer group, in the same way as there's a group for clinicians, and they're consulted and engaged with about the business of the board, and that is then fed into the board meeting, and a member of Voices for Care is asked to present, is asked to attend the meeting, but also has the opportunity to speak at the meeting as well, asked to be part of the meeting. In the Republic, the National Clinical Programme for Palliative Care has 2 members from Voices for Care on their working group. I suppose maybe I'd say that we ask members of Voices for Care that that they're there as an individual, and that we don't expect them to represent the views of all. We don't ask them to represent the views of Voices for Care. They're there as an individual speaking on their own behalf. We just think that's an important piece of how we work the group. Going the wrong way. Just to mention a little bit, we have a Palliative Care Research Network, which is a network of leading researchers from across the island of Ireland. There's 46 members currently, including a number of colleagues from within UCC. And we support them with, funding, collaboration, knowledge transfer, and service user care engagement, PPI, I suppose, as we'd call it here. Just to highlight a number of ways in which we engage with Voices for Care members. So speaking at research events. So for example, we're currently planning for our Palliative Care Research Network annual symposium, which will take place on the 2nd of December. And we're holding a meeting with Voices for Care in early November. We're going to do a consultation session, and that will directly feed into one of the agenda items around equity of service delivery in palliative care. So it's really, and we'll seek a member of Voices for Care to be part of that session at the annual symposium. Contributing to research projects, co-creating research outputs, reviewing research grant proposals and materials, membership of steering committees, and inputting into the development of research events, inputting into, like say, publicly information for the public, part of research projects, also we've had a number of requests from our researchers who are looking to engage with members of Voices for Care, either by attending and doing a session at one of the Voices for Care meetings. Recently, they've all been online, or by having special meetings, an additional meeting with Voices for Care members on certain events. I suppose with those meetings, what we're always looking to ensure is we're always conscious of the time. So I suppose with online meetings, we look at an hour and a half being kind of a good amount of time, because we're very conscious that our members are volunteers. So we've had some suggestions of invites to members for like 6-hour meetings, and we have to kind of go back and say, we struggle to commit to giving 6 hours, so it's very difficult, we feel, for a volunteer to be asked to do that as well. we're looking forward to returning to face-to-face consultations and events early next year. And I would say we also look to provide training for members of Voices for Care and opportunities to attend conferences. So recently there was the Irish Hospice Foundation's Forum on End of Life, and we put a call out and offered to fund members of the group to attend that. So it's, you know, the idea that it's a mutually supportive relationship with our Voices for Care members. We also have guidance for researchers on engaging with PPI, service user care engagement. So we have an involvement request form that's really just asking some of those questions and really some of those prompts to research in terms of some of the things that might be considered when looking to engage with service user and carers, including meeting costs and those kind of things. And we've recently launched a web resource on our palliative professional to provide guidance to researchers, obviously linking in with PPI Ignite resources, but you know, some of the considerations around engaging with you know, service users who have palliative care needs, for example. And then that's me. Thank you. I'm now going to try. Oh, stop sharing. Oh, sorry about that. I was more worried about stopping the share. So sorry.
So Stephanie Skeffington is up next. Do you want to come in there, Stephanie?
Yeah. Hold on now. Let's see if I can share my own now. Can you see that now? No.
Yeah, if you want to put on full
yeah,
screen.
That's perfect. Once you can see it.
Great.
No, hold on. Oh, we'll go back to the beginning. Just sorry now. Now, okay. Well, hello everyone, and thanks for having me here. My name is Stephanie Skeffington, and I'm an individual patient advocate. The first thing is just tell you a little bit about who I am. I have 25 years lived experience of being a patient with a long-term condition, starting in childhood. I have two conditions. One's called juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and the second is vasculitis. And I've been a patient advocate for over 10 years. My educational background is in business law and social policy, and I've had some training in integrated care and in patient education programs in clinical trials and medication regulation. I've worked with a number of charities like the Irish Children's Arthritis Network and Arthritis Ireland, and I've also been able to work with the HSC, UCC, UCD, HICWA, and RSCI. The reason why I got involved in research was, first of all, was to help other people, especially those who maybe didn't want to get involved in research themselves or felt they weren't able to. The second reason is I have what you'd call maybe a fixer personality. If I see a solution or a way in which things can be better, I like to share it to improve things. Also, it was a great opportunity. Being able to be involved in research is not something I would have been able to do if I actually didn't have a medical condition. Also, I take great comfort in knowledge. So being able to understand things, to understand my condition, to understand ways to improve things, actually give me comfort. So it's better for me the more knowledge I have. And it was also an excellent opportunity to learn more. The first project I ever was involved with in research was in UCD, in the Rheumatology Research Centre. I was invited to be a committee member of a newly discovered rheumatic disease. Again, this was a great opportunity, and it was something which I was very nervous going into, because I immediately assumed I would have no idea of what I'm doing. I wouldn't understand anything, you know, it would be way above my head, but it just wasn't like that. When I went in, everyone was very nice and kind, and I wasn't the patient in the room, I was another part of the team. In that project, which is now finished, I was part of the interview panel for a postdoc researcher. I was part of in-person committee meetings, which were obviously pre-COVID, and I did a number of lay summaries for them. One of the main goals for me on this project was to ensure that it wasn't just scientifically sound, but that it actually had a benefit for the people with this new condition. And one of the ways in which we did this was they were also not just determining that this was in fact the new condition, but what kind of therapies would actually benefit the people who had this. The second project I wanted to talk about was part of what's called the European reference networks, which have been set up all over Europe to help rare diseases. And the one which involves my area of expertise, which would be rheumatic diseases, it was called the ERN-RITA. Part of my involvement with ERN-RITA is that I'm on the transition working group. And part of this group's remit is to make recommendations for a transition from pediatric to adult services for all children with rare diseases across Europe. Presently, we're having to do this through Zoom meetings because of COVID. And we were recently going through the recommendations, and one issue that came up was the age at which a person should transition. The type of language used was the issue that there was a different viewpoint between the pediatricians and the patient advocates. Pediatricians were of the view that they should be gone at 18 because you're adults then and you can't be in a children's service, you're too big, you know, it's not right, which is a viewpoint I can understand. But it's not a viewpoint that was actually shared among children with rheumatic diseases. One of the national organizations I work with, which I previously mentioned, called ICANN, actually did a weekend workshop for children with rheumatic diseases in teaching them all the skills and information they needed to transition from pediatric to adult services. And one of the feedbacks we had from the children was they didn't want to do it when they were doing the Leaving Cert, which means that they didn't want to do it when they were about 17 or 18 years of age. So what I did was, when we were discussing this on our Zoom meeting, I brought back this feedback and explained to them that actually their viewpoint of it should happen at 18 was actually contrary to what the children themselves who were going through these diseases felt. So we're having an ongoing discussion about that. My voice was very much heard, which is why we're having ongoing discussions. Even something as simple as them changing the word from should occur at 18 to ideally should happen at 18 would be hugely beneficial, because then it encourages pediatricians around Europe to use their own initiative and to treat patients as individuals as opposed to collective. Also, another thing I'd like to point out about this project was, in terms of the research papers that are going to be submitted, us as patient advocates are being named equally on them as participants in the research. The first project I'd like to talk about is actually a UCC project. It's part of the PPI Ignite project. It's a relatively new project. It involves actually Emmy and Patricia, and I'm part of the PPI committee member, and it involves using AI technology, and we're currently at the funding stage. Now, AI is completely new to me. I am not a very technologically minded person. So going into this project, it was this new and steep learning curve for me, but because it's such a collaborative environment, it was fine for me to go in there having no idea. It felt completely safe, and no question was a stupid question, if that makes sense. So far, we've been part of the consortium meetings via Zoom, and we had an opportunity to create a lay summary, which was a great opportunity to actually try and understand the project a bit more. 2 points about this project so far, which I think have been really good, is that Emmy actually organised a initial meeting for the PPI group for us, just ourselves, because there's actually 5 of us. So we could get to know each other and kind of see each other and have our own little individual meeting. We're also an equal member of the Europe-wide consortium, which is another great opportunity because we're getting to meet people from all over Europe and hear their views on the project, and to kind of have all of the views from people around Europe is a great opportunity, as opposed to just dealing with people from Ireland. Some key points that I just kind of want to point out when it comes to research is, when you value someone as an equal team member, you really have to treat them as an equal team member. Research papers are probably the second issue coming down the line. The first one, some of the people have already picked up on, which would be reimbursement. In terms of the research papers, like I said, on one project I was put down where everybody else was put down. There was no differentiating between researchers and patient advocates. We were all one. But there has been other projects where I've been the team member until the research papers have been written, and then maybe it's an acknowledgement. And it just makes you feel like maybe you're not as equal member, team member as you thought you were, especially when you're maybe the only person at the table who wasn't being paid as well. It does kind of sting a little. Also, for your voice to be heard and listened to. You know, people can hear you but not necessarily listen to you. And as a patient advocate, you can tell very easily if someone's listening to you. It's a learning process for everybody. You know, we are all finding our feet, even if we've done it tons of time before. And I think what's really important is everyone brings their own unique qualifications and learned experience to a project. And ultimately, we all just want the same thing, and that's just to improve things. And I just like to thank everyone for listening today. And that's me.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And thanks to Karen and Nikki as well. Fantastic brief talks, but we've learned a lot. So just before I move on to the next piece where Dr. Martin Galvin is going to officially launch PPI Ignite Network at UCC, I'm just going to very briefly show you some of the upcoming events and initiatives that we have planned over the next couple of weeks. So first up, just to flag that on Monday, as part of UCC Community Week, we will have a documentary special online screening of the Patient Effect documentary. This is a really fantastic documentary which showcases 3 different examples, case studies of PPI, and it was developed by the PPI Ignite team in Galway and a documentary team there as well. And it does feature the Neptune project, which is based in the Infant Research Centre. So I'll pop the link to register to attend in the chat. The documentary is about 25 minutes, but it really does capture the kind of ethos and the culture of PPI. So it'd be great if you want to register and attend that. We also have a number of training courses coming up. We've got a PPI in clinical trials training course on the 24th of November. We're running a course on creating and running a PPI group on the 1st of December. And then we've got a doing PPI virtually course on the 8th of December. I don't have the registration links. They're not open yet for these courses, but if you are interested, please email ppi@ucc.ie and I can send you some more information. We also have a seminar series, a lunchtime seminar series starting next month. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers. We've got, I suppose really it's about similar to today, we really want to kind of have honest conversations about PPI, about the benefits of PPI, the practicalities, and there are often challenges as well to doing PPI in research. So that's what our seminar series is really going to try and achieve. So that will be starting next month. And then all of this will be advertised on a new website. I was really hoping to have the website ready for today's launch, but fortunately it's going to take another week or 2 to get everything uploaded. So we'll have a new website which will be live in a week or 2. There'll be loads of PPI case studies, resources, support, and of course news and events as well, which is where we'll post information about our seminars and workshops and training courses and so on. I should say as well that a big part of my job as program manager is to support researchers in developing their PPI. So if any of you have questions about PPI or you'd like to, think about ways that you can incorporate PPI in your research, please do get in touch with me. I'll pop my email in the chat and feel free to get in touch. And then finally, if you want to follow us on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, we could do with a few new followers. This is where we're advertising everything at the moment and kind of creating a shared learning space. So if you're on Twitter, do give us a follow. And I should mention as well that on the 2nd of November, it's Tuesday, there will be a national PPI Ignite Network launch. So today is very much a UCC event, but the national launch will be happening on the 2nd of November. So that will be posted up on Twitter and on the website as well. So that's just a brief snapshot. We have other things coming up, but just to give you an idea of the type of things that we're planning for you. So now I'm going to hand over to Martin Galvin, Martin is the UCC Civic and Community Engagement Officer. He's going to do the honours of officially launching PPI Ignite Network at UCC. And Martin has extensive experience and background in engaged research and engaged scholarship. So we're delighted to have him here to launch the event.
Thanks a million, Emmy. And Stephanie, it was fantastic to hear everything you said. I think you've really brought some kind of emotion to it, actually. It was really nice to hear from you, and particularly around those comments around that your voice was heard and the importance of equality in research. They were really well received, and I think you were, on message in a very personal and emotional way. So I want to really thank you for that. And a warm congratulations to Patricia and to Emmy for bringing the PPI initiative to UCC, and for the extraordinary work and leadership going on behind the scenes and making all of that happen. It's not easy and fantastic, and thank you so much for that. And it's great to see the involvement of colleagues across the universities. I think that's a really important part of the initiative, that it's reaching out across the whole university. And today we have colleagues from ISS 21 SHAPE Cluster, from the Civic and Community Engagement Committee, APC, HRB Clinical Research Facility, and many, many more. So just the people that came today, that's fantastic. And particular congratulations actually to the HRB and IRC for their national leadership, and to Sean and colleagues in NUIG as well, because that's an extraordinary commitment to be making nationally, and to be overtly taking that position that patients and people have a right to be involved in research. Such an important thing. And also locally, from a community engagement perspective, it's great to see the community partners involved, and that they're an integral part of the whole initiative, and especially the Cork City of Sanctuary, Family Carers Ireland, Cork Kerry HSC, Our Lady's Hospice, and to you, Karen, Nikki, and Stephanie, for your involvement too. It's really, really welcome. And I know you're going to bring great energy and passion to this and to this area of actually our university's work. I know it's an area that our new Vice President of Research and Innovation, John Crine, his colleagues in the Research Office, and our colleagues on the Academic Council Research and Innovation Committee in UCC are really particularly interested in. So having that community partner involvement, I think, will help inform all those conversations that are going on at a leadership level in our university as well. And there's extraordinary societally engaged work going on across the university that I know Emmy and Patricia and all of you will be reaching out to and involving, and working together to make this really count and be an important feature of what we do in UCC. We're number 8 in the world for impact towards the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that kind of success is really evident in the difference that initiatives such as the PPI Ignite initiative will make and are making locally and nationally to people and patients, so that they have a real say in health research in Cork, in Ireland, through co-producing research and being engaged in research, so that ultimately research matters for people and it makes a difference in their lives. So it gives me great pleasure to launch the PPI Ignite in Cork and UCC, and I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing Emmy, Patricia, and everyone involved every success and the very, very best for the future. Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Patricia.
Great, thanks a million, Martin, and thanks to everyone for joining today. I was delighted, like Martin said, to see such broad kind of representation across the university. So thanks again for joining. I'll pop those links in the chat there now, and if you have any questions at all, feel free to get in touch. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.